Rebel Author Podcast, where we talk about books, business, and occasionally bad words. Hello, Rebels, and welcome to episode 122 of the Rebel Author Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Jami Albright, and we're going to be talking all things smoochy, sexy. It's all about romance writing today. But first, to last week's question, which was, what is your inner genius? Not too many responses to this. A little bit of chitter-chatter in the Patreon Slack group, but we did have one comment from Amazing Gaming Productions on Instagram who said, "My inner genius is my empathy. Even though I know my characters only live in my mind, when I talk to him or her and we're about to go through a difficult scene, I'm weeping for them, telling them it's going to be fine and that things will turn out all right in the end. Unless it doesn't, because the character is on a toxic negative arc or tumbling down greater darkness." I love that. And I might have to ask that question, like how many of us do cry or feel emotions like when we're writing? Because I don't have empathy as one of my Clifton strengths. And I know that if you're a patron and you're listening, there's a bit of an in-joke that everybody now needs to drink or have a shot because I've mentioned bloody Clifton strengths again. But I don't have empathy. And yet occasionally, wait, hang on a second, because if I admit this, then everyone's going to know that I'm not dead on the inside. Guys, listen, I am still dead on the inside, but like occasionally, like I feel stuff when I write stuff. And if anyone uses this against me, we're not friends anymore. Anyway, this week's question is, how are you advocating for your creative self? So the reason I ask this is because I think it's really important that we have our own back. And that means sometimes we have to pull up our big girl panties and we have to do the scary or difficult thing. And sometimes that means negotiating on a contract or negotiating on a speaking fee, or it means we have to raise our book prices, or it means we have to say no to somebody so that we can take that time to write, or it means that we have to say, no, I'm sorry, I need to do research, or I'm going to read this evening, or whatever it is. I want you guys to think about how you are advocating for your creative selves, and then let me know because it's important. Okay, the book recommendation of the week this week is Get Rich, Lucky Bitch. Release Your Money Blocks and Live a First-Class Life by Denise Duffield-Thomas. I listened to this on audio. It's a little bit woo-woo, I won't lie, but I kind of like a bit of woo-woo every so often. There's a lot of like positive feelings. Oh my God, this is just like the theme for this week is feelings. Guys, I swear I don't have any, okay? I swear. But yes, so the book is a little bit woo-woo. It talks a lot about manifesting and positive mindset and really framing things in your mind to change your vibrations and make sure that you are calling money to you and all of that good stuff. Look, basically, I am really on a mission to increase my turnover this year and profit, of course. And so I am trying to fuel my mind, my energy, my soul with lots of positivity around money. And I find it uncomfortable. Like I listened to Rachel Herron's amazing podcast the other day where it's one of the more recent ones. So she did like a roundup of what she earned last year. And I was so inspired and so like, I wish I had the confidence to talk about money like that. And that is something that I aspire to and that I would like to do. I'm not ready to do that yet, but I am intending to. Like, I would like to give you guys an episode on like what I earn and where it all comes from. I'm not there yet, but maybe I will be one day or soon. And yeah, like definitely inspired by Rachel Herron's podcast. Actually, I will put a link to that in the show notes because it was fascinating. She is both traditionally published and self-published, and she has multiple streams of income. So yes, it is fascinating, and I do recommend that episode as well as the book, which is what I'm supposed to be recommending right now. But yes, I also recommend Get Rich, Lucky Bitch. Okay, so in personal updates, well... It has been a week, let me tell you. So I am on a mission, as I've already said, to increase my turnover, grow my business, increase my income. To do that, my coach, my strengths coach, basically asked me for a business plan for how I was going to make the extra money. And it's not a little bit of money, it is a big chunk of money. And so I dutifully did that. I sent it off, and then realizing how much fucking work was involved in it, I rather rapidly decided I needed to outsource a bit more. So I spoke to the ever amazing, ever lovely, and she is just the most lovely human, Becca, who is the VA for this podcast, and she has very kindly agreed to take on some more hours for me, and we are doing some like one-off projects which are really kind of like upgrading everything, looking at metadata and making sure all my prices are standardized. I am going to be raising the prices on some of my books, this kind of stuff. Updating new files, all of this stuff. And then we've also got a whole load of like business planning stuff. But I wanted to make sure that like the publishing house side of what I do is in order before I, put sales on or do, I don't know, publish more stuff or whatever. So this week has been quite heavy brain work because we have had to put systems in place, create like templates and spreadsheets and systems and ways of working together. And it's hard. Like when you have been the only person growing your business all this time and you start outsourcing things, like I definitely used to be more of a control freak than I am. And now I really value being able to free up time so that I can do the creative stuff. And I really value how amazing Becca is because she loves the type of work that I don't love. So we make a great team, and like if I haven't said it already, I really fucking love Becca. But yes, so basically we have had a big old chat, and I created lots of things that we're going to do together. I don't want to go into too much detail, but yeah, so I am outsourcing a buttload of additional work, and things will be changing on the back end of my business quite a bit. So yeah, I don't know how much more I can outsource, but I will just continue to keep outsourcing so that I can free up as much of my time as possible to do the important stuff, which is record the podcast, write the books, create the courses. So yeah, I think that's probably it on the business side. On the personal side, my son has COVID. So that's fun. He tested positive this morning. Thankfully, he's absolutely fine. He does have a little bit of a headache, but Calpol, sort of paracetamol, ibuprofen stuff for kids, knocked that on the head. I went and also had a PCR with him this morning. My wife can't have a PCR because she had COVID within the last 28 days. It's just a fucking month for it. So yes, I am negative. I was negative this morning on the lateral flows. But yeah, I mean, I have to wait. I think our PCRs will come back tomorrow. Yeah, I mean, I have now been exposed, I think like 3 times directly to COVID, and I haven't picked it up. That said, I think because my son has got it, this is the most likely chance I have of picking it up, because obviously I am not going to stop hugging my son or being near my son. So, I'm assuming, well, I'm going to tell myself I won't get it and try to manifest that, but you never know. So next week might be a very different podcast, but fingers crossed. Everybody have their fingers crossed for me that I don't pick it up. And yeah, I'm just very grateful that kids are very resilient, and he seems completely fine. So I mean, he was coding on his bloody computer this morning. He's now playing on his Switch. So he's mostly delighted that he doesn't have to go to school. So kids, they're amazing, man. Seriously. So yes, what else am I doing? Oh, so many things. This outsourcing is requiring. What is the word? Requiring. Oh my God. This outsourcing needs. This outsourcing needs me to do a lot of work in order to enable Becca to do a load of work, in order to enable me to do a load of work. So there's a bit of flip-flopping around, and but I think what I'm going to do is slap on a out of office next week, because I need to finish Trey. My My promise to myself was that I was going to get it done before the end of the month. It's going to be difficult now with the kid off school, but I'm going to give it a bash anyway. But in order to do that, I'm going to have to kind of not do anything else because it will be literally editing or mum time. So I will probably be not very accessible over the next week or so. And then I will be moving on to doing a course and the next non-fiction book, and that will be early February. So yes. Okay, I think that's probably enough from me. I am going to do the Rebel of the Week. So the Rebel of the Week this week is April Jones. April says, my hubby has a rebellion for you. Not sure it's appropriate or not, but here it goes. I'll set the stage for you first. It's a small town with disgruntled cops. Late at night on a school day, he was driving a loud muscle car. He gets pulled over by the cops, who love pulling teenagers over because they could be smoking pot. It's late, so he's tired, and the cop inquires, "My, you sure do have some bloodshot eyes. Have you been smoking anything lately?" Without missing a beat, he looks the cop dead in the eye and says, "No, officer, your eyes sure are glazed over. You been eating the donuts again?" Oh my goodness me, your husband has balls of steel. I'm amazed he did that. Yeah, wow, that is very cheeky. I love that rebellion. If you would like to be a Rebel of the Week, please do send in your story. I think we had 2 rebellions come in this week, so thank you for that. But of course, we have less than, I think, 6 in the bank. So there's only 6 weeks of rebellions left. So please do send in your stories. They can be anything. It can be anything. It can be a big rebellion, a little cheeky rebellion. It can be a middle-sized one. It could be like April, you could send in a rebellion from your husband or your spouse or your wife or a brother or a sister. You can send your Rebel story to Becca and Sasha at Rebel. So the email address is rebelauthorpodcast@gmail.com. No new patrons today, but a gigantic thank you to all of my existing patrons. I really, really appreciate you. You guys help to keep the show running. You help to pay for my time to do it. You help to encourage me and make me feel like what I'm doing is having an impact and helping you guys. So thank you so, so much. I really appreciate it. If you would like to support the show and get early access to all of the episodes, as well as random bonus content or joining the Slack group or being part of the Rebel Readers masterclasses, then you can from as little as $2 a month by visiting patreon.com/Sasha Black. This episode is sponsored by the ever amazing Kobo Writing Life, so I'm going to play a word from the sponsor and then we will get on with the episode.
Hey Rebels, we're from Kobo Writing Life, Kobo's free, fast, and easy self-publishing platform. Kobo Writing Life was built by authors for authors, and our team of dedicated book lovers is always working hard to help authors reach new readers around the world. One of the ways we're doing that is by giving you the chance to reach subscription readers by opting your titles into Kobo Plus.
Kobo Plus is our subscription program, which offers thousands of titles in an all-you-can-read catalog to readers in select countries. It's currently available in the Netherlands, Belgium, Portugal, and Canada, with plans to expand. Stay tuned for that. Authors can opt into all territories or pick and choose as they please.
It's really important to us that authors retain complete control over their work, which is why we will never ever ask you to be exclusive. You can opt your books in on a per title basis and continue selling them on all other retailers.
Kobo Plus helps get your books in front of a new audience of subscription readers, who are a different audience than our typical a la carte readers, and allows you to earn money on top of your a la carte sales. Authors get paid for every minute spent reading, including rereads, so opt your books in now and reach even more Kobo readers. If you want to learn more about Kobo Writing Life, check out our blog, podcast, and find us on social. You can create your free account at kobo.com/writinglife. Now back to Sasha. Happy writing.
Hello and welcome to the Rebel Author podcast. Today, I am joined by Jami Albright. Jami is a born and raised Texas girl and is the multiple award-winning author of the Brides on the Run series and the Small Town Royalty series. Both are fun, sexy, snarky, and laugh out loud. If you don't snort with laughter, then she hasn't done her job. Hello and welcome.
Thank you so much. This is so exciting. I do a lot of podcasts, but I was just kind of nervous before I got on. So I'm very excited to be here, but in a good way,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Anticipation. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't be nervous. Don't be nervous. Although I say that, and that's kind of hypocritical of me because I always get nervous anyway. None of us are like most of us are introverts. So it's always scary meeting, like, well, not new because I know we've met before, but still it's a lot, I think. Yes. Okay. Tell everyone a little bit about your journey. Like, how did you get started writing and sort of what happened to get you to where you are today?
Okay. So I write romantic comedy and steamy romantic comedy. And I started writing when I was just before I turned 50 because it was my reading buddy's birthday. And I was trying to do something meaningful for her. And I'd never written down the stories that I always made up in my head because my grammar's not great. But I was thinking, Jennifer doesn't care if I have bad grammar. This is just, we read a lot and it would have been meaningful. And I started writing, wrote myself in a corner very quickly with that book because I really didn't know what I was doing. But not all of it was horrible. And so I told her, I was going to write you a story. And she was like, well, now you have to. So I started working on what was my first book, which is Running from a Rock Star. And didn't really do much with, I would write and put it away and write and put it away. And then my computer crashed and I lost it. And I was like, well, I'm not a writer anymore. It was just for fun. And then when I turned 50, I told my family, the only thing I think I regret is not finishing that book. And of course they said, well, you can do it again. I'm like, no, I'm not starting over. And a few months later, my daughter came in and said, Mom, I think I have your book on this flash drive that was in my car.
No.
And it was about 20,000 of the 30,000 words I'd written. I know, crazy. And so I dusted it off as best I could. And actually had somebody else look at it. And she helped me a little bit as far as just like, so I wouldn't be completely embarrassed if I showed it to anybody. And then I joined Romance Writers of America and started a critique group, and they kicked my ass from here to Dallas just because of grammar and story stuff. I didn't know how to write a romance. I had read Romance Writing for Dummies, but there's only so much you can learn there. And but they taught me to write. They did their best with the grammar, but 6 months after joining that group, I won my first contest with that book. Even though I only had 20,000 words written, you only had to have the first 5,000 or something like that. And I sent it in and won the contest. So that was the Romance Writers of America contest that they had. And the editor that read it said, "Ooh, I really want this book." And I was like, funny thing, it's not really done. And thank God it wasn't, because I would have given it to them, and because I didn't know any better. And then continued on with that critique group. 3 of us broke off and kind of did our own thing, but we were really serious about publishing. I wrote a short story, not a short story, a novella, Christmas novella with one of my critique partners under a different name. And it just, you put it up and it doesn't go anywhere. And you're like, what the heck, and that's when I started trying to learn about indie publishing, because we did indie publish that, and how to get your book seen, and I went to indie publishing boot camp. I mean, I started listening to podcasts. I went to a conference 5 months after that. My book wasn't, I was going to put it out probably after that conference, but decided, based on the things I heard and the advice I got, to wait. And I spent a whole year just learning indie publishing. And I really think that that's why my books have done as well as they've done. Or I feel like I've written good books, but also I set myself up for success by doing that, because I also had a newsletter, 1,200 person newsletter before the first book ever came out. Yeah. And that's all because I learned that in my self-imposed indie publishing boot camp. So.
I know that you are a Becca, you're in Becca's arena and
Yes.
you've done your strokes. Do you have strategic by any chance?
I do not.
You don't?
No, I know. Funny enough, I think it may be in my top 10. But if it is, it's like 10.
Okay.
I'm not terribly strategic. And people always say that. I just think my fear of failure was so high that I was doing everything I could to do it right. My number one is activator. So, it's a wonder I was able to wait. I know.
Yeah, that is like incredible.
Me. I know. It killed me to wait. But I think that it was because, again, I had put a book out and it had just done nothing. And I did not want that. I had worked too hard on this book. Also, another reason I chose to go indie publishing is because I was 53 when that book came out. Like, I don't have a lot of time to go back and forth with people and, do the whole editor and querying thing. And that was kind of the same thing with this, with my journey to indie publishing. Like, I wanted to hit the ground running. I wanted to give this book as the best shot it could have. Never really thinking I would write more than 2 books, if you want the truth. I just didn't know this if I could. And so, 7 books later, and I'm doing okay, so it worked out.
Well, I wanted to take this podcast kind of in 2 halves. Okay. The first one was to talk about romance. And then the second one was to talk about your business model. Because I've heard you speak. I can't remember where now, but I remember listening to you. It feels like a while ago, but time is a bit of a lie. So maybe it wasn't. And the fact that you are writing in romance, which is sort of, I suppose, under rules or conventional expectations, a faster paced genre, but that you publish at your own pace. So that's sort of the second half that I want to talk about. Okay. But the first half I want to talk about is about romance. And so I would love to know, we sort of talked about it offline, that you are a great storyteller. So like, what are those fundamental elements of a successful, really good romance story?
Well, first I'm going to say that I think it varies for everybody. I think there used to be these hard and fast rules set out by organizations like Romance Writers of America, and then they were tied to the publishers. But I would say that for me, a good romance has tons of tension. The conflict that rises and rises and rises until you almost burst. And then, and even if sex is introduced early in the book, that the sex complicates things even more, and so you still have that rising tension and great characters, characters that people just really can fall in love with. And you've got to make them likable, even if they're unlikable. I mean, it's basic storytelling, and but for romance in particular, and you just have to have that really satisfying ending, the one that just gets you right in the heart. And so those are the things that I think are really important in romance, that, just keeping that tension going, till the very end. And also why this person is the only person in the world for this person, and vice versa, but they can't see it. And you have to, as you're going along, I'm moving my hands, as you're going along, you're kind of piecing those puzzle pieces together so that at the end you have, this beautiful picture. So.
And I think, like I have a love-hate relationship with tension, because it drives me wild. But that's what I go for, right? I go berserk because I'm like, I just kiss already, But I know. I don't really want them to kiss, because then then you get some of that tension release. But what advice would you have for listeners to create better tension? Like, how do you build attraction with your characters, and how do you build and layer that into sort of that sexual tension and intimacy in the stories?
I think one of the best ways I've found recently is I use the Enneagram. Claire Taylor does a whole thing on this, and that's helped me because I don't know if you're familiar with the Enneagram. I'm not great at it, but there are 9 types, and they're in a circle, and if you're this, then this is the opposite, or these are the pairs that would, and so. But whatever you use, if you use archetypes or whatever, you try to get those people that are, it's interesting, like they have the same wound and the same thing would heal them, but they don't see that. Like they're almost opposites, but it kind of comes together that way, that, as you're healing one of their wounds, the other one is healing as well. And then you take them through. Of course, I have pretty wounded characters, even though I write rom-com, and I get sometimes I get dinged for that, but that's really kind of the only way I know how to write characters or real people that have real problems. And but my advice would be just really layer in those things that would attract, and then like I do like little touches, or like, I don't know, there's a Grey's Anatomy that I always think about, Grey's Anatomy episode where I can't even think of the characters, but they're not supposed to be, they're keeping, I think it's the
is it McDreamy and Meredith?
It's not McDreamy and Meredith. No, it's Meredith's best friend, whose name I cannot think of it.
Christina Yang,
and then the redheaded Scottish doctor. And they've gotten together, but nobody knows it. And they're walking down the hall and they brush hands against each other. And the camera zeroes in on that. And I don't know, like I got a little flitter in my stomach when that happened, because it's just so intimate, and it's so, it's kind of delicious. And Theodore Taylor's, book on universal fantasies, it's that kind of thing, the things that kind of make you go yum are the things that will make your readers go yum. And so you layer those things in to create attraction between your characters.
Yeah, I actually listened to the episode that she was on, that your podcast, the Wish I'd Known Then podcast, and I thought it was excellent. And I have read the book as well. And I completely agree. And it's funny, isn't it? Because intimacy smacks of like, well, I suppose on the outside, we all see intimacy as like being naked in bed, but really it's not that at all. Like intimacy.
Doing it.
Yeah. Banging. It's really not that though.
No, it's not.
The things that are the most intimate, I suppose, are the vulnerability and the, and the thing that's vulnerable about that hand caress is that, if they get caught, they could be in trouble, or their friends will find out. And so, and yet they want each other enough that they are willing to take that risk for each other in public. Right. And I suppose it's that kind of thing that creates that tummy flutter. So like you mentioned that your characters are wounded. Can you I'd love to know a bit more about your characters, like maybe a couple of examples, or tell me about some of your characters, how you use those wounds or create them for the characters.
Okay. I think the place I did it the best and most unexpectedly is in my second book. In the first book, the hero he's this high-powered entertainment lawyer. He's very cocky, very, and so the second book is a enemies to lovers. She's also an attorney and she hates his guts, and, and he's all about the car and the money and the suit and the whole thing. And what we find out is he grew up dirt poor. Like at one point his family was homeless. Yes. Oh God. When I figured that out, I'm all in. When I figured that out, I was like, how can I make him? Because most people liked him, but some people didn't, because he is really cocky in the first book. And when I figured that out, like it was just that warm honey feeling all over my body. I was like, I've done it, And then in Homecoming King, which is the first book in my Small Town Royalty series, he is a professional football player, but he grew up on the wrong side of the track. In fact, he says my family didn't just grow up on the wrong side of the tracks. They blew the tracks up and then took the scrap metal and beat the hell out of somebody with it, because they were just really the bad people in town. And then his dad died, his dad and his uncles were killed in a car accident, and they were the bad ones. And he and his mom were still treated badly, like people would watch them when they came into stores and stuff like that in the town. And then, so his whole thing is the only thing he's worth anything for is football. That's when he was able to throw, a 50-yard pass, then that's when people started treating he and his mom differently. And so that is something that he clings to, even though it's really hurting him. The football of itself is hurting him in the book, and but he clings to it like crazy because that's what he finds his worth in. So,
I love that.
Those are just two examples.
Yeah, no, I love that though, and I think that really puts it like into context as well. And I also like had the whole honey feeling, because I was like all in on the cocky lawyer now, like especially when you know the background. What was that I was listening to the other day? Lisa Cron on Joanna Penn's podcast was talking about how important backstory is. And that just goes to show that's the perfect example of how your backstory just made that character. So yeah, I love that. What are your pet peeves, or like, what do you think are the biggest mistakes that newer writers make when trying to dive into the romance genre?
I say some of these may be pet peeves that really successful romance authors do. They're just not what I love. Like, I don't love Insta-Love, but that people love it. I mean, they love it. I don't love it. I like to see that build up and that, that tension being built. But Insta-Love is great because you can do all kinds of things with it too. But what I see is one, sex for the sake of sex, and not moving the story forward. Like, if you're going to have sex in a book, in a romance, I feel like it should move the story forward, just like everything else in the book. It shouldn't just be like the story is going along, stop, we're having sex, and then we move on like that sex didn't affect anything. It's just sex for the sake of sex. And I also think that they don't, I feel like the pacing is usually hard for newer writers. Mine would have been a disaster had I not had that help that I had. But just learning how to pace the story and make it flow so that you're yanking the readers along. Like, they can't put the book down, like ending chapters on a hook, leaving people just wanting more. They just have to read another page. And I think that's just something that you have to learn as you go along. And I was lucky enough that I had somebody say, no, this isn't going to work. You have to do better. And teaching me to do better. I also think that they don't do enough. They either do too much like backstory and then they dump all that in to the book, or they don't do enough. And so you've got these one-dimensional characters kind of going through the story that it's hard to become attached to because we don't know them. And so those are a few things.
So Insta-Love, I'm going to ask the stupid question. I'm assuming that Insta-Love literally means they come onto the page and they fall in love instantly. Yeah.
Pretty much. Or Insta-Lust, which I'm okay with Insta-Lust, and I'm okay with sex. I've started a book with sex, myself, but there just has to be more than that. And I find that people that start with Insta-Love or Insta-Lust, when it's like this, the good ones take that and then crank up the tech, the tension and everything. But a lot of people that try to do that, it doesn't go anywhere. There's just no place for that story to go. So
my favorite,
you have to be careful with that.
Yes, you do.
Have to be careful.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense. I am I was thinking that because I love enemies to lovers, but I also like rivals to lovers. And I didn't know there was a difference, but there is a difference. And so I recently learned the difference. I actually think my favorite is rivals to lovers because you tend to see the competition. Now I just realized it's because for God's sake.
Because you're number one competition.
Literally, as I was speaking, I was like, "Oh,
that's hilarious."
Oh, it's such a cliche. It's unbelievable.
We all are. We all are.
Let's just move on from that, shall we?
But yes, I love that too.
Yeah, yeah.
I love that too.
Okay,
so will they or won't they is really my favorite part of a romance.
And like when you go in and you absolutely and you read the first 2 or 3 chapters and you're like, I know who the lover is going to be, but like there's just no possible way that they can be lovers in those first few chapters. And then you're like, how is that, and that's what keeps me going. So yeah, I think that means I also don't like Insta-Love. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, there's some really great Insta-Love books. Some of my friends write them and they are fantastic, but they've done it right. If you don't do it right, you have a very flat book.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so everyone knows that humor is tricky to write, but what romantic comedy is a really, really popular kind of like secondary category of romance. And I know that you like to make your readers laugh. So
I do.
If an author would like to sort of lace in comedy into their writing, how on earth do you do it effectively?
That's a hard question for somebody that writes comedy and does it intuitively, because I am a bit of an intuitive writer, but and I don't always hit the mark. I mean, I try really hard, but what I would say is, one, don't always go for low-hanging fruit. And don't get me wrong, I will go for low-hanging fruit if it's there. If there's a dick joke to be made or, something like that, I will make it. But I don't do that all the time. I try to make my comedy smarter than that. And so a lot of times what I will do to layer in comedy is if I have a scene and I'm like, or I'm even trying to write something funny and it's just not, or it feels boring or whatever, I will flip things. And as an example, in that second book I was talking about where he's poor, they lose all their money, they lose their phones, they can't get in touch with anybody because, nobody knows anybody's phone number anymore. And they've gotten robbed by pistol-toting grannies. And so they don't have any, I know, it's crazy. So they see a sign that says, it's amateur night at the strip club. And he looks at her and she's like, no way. And he's like, listen, that's fine. You don't have to, but we're going to sleep outside. And she's like, I don't know why that is what set her off, but that's what set her off. And so, but when they get there, she makes up her mind. I'm doing this. The next day they can get in touch with somebody, but they can't right then. And they get to the strip club and they're looking around and she's like, wow, the men here in this county are pretty open-minded. There are a lot of women here. And then it hits you. It's ladies' night. So she's not the one that has to strip. He has to strip.
Amazing.
But I flipped it because the whole time I knew I was going to have that scene. Like I knew they were going to be stranded. She was going to have to strip, but there was something in me, like my little feminist heart was just going, no, not that there's anything wrong with stripping. I'm just saying that I did not want, there was just something going, that just seems so easy kind of thing. And then when I thought, no, I'll flip it and he will strip, that is the surprise. And that's the thing with comedy. Comedy is always a surprise. It's what you don't expect that makes it funny and it makes you laugh, even if it's uncomfortable for you, even if it's not something you like, your taste in laugh, your taste in comedy, if it's a little raunchy or whatever, you still laugh a lot of the time because it's so unexpected. And that's the thing that's the best thing about comedy. If you can surprise people with something funny, that's always the best. People will remember that. And actually, that scene, that strip scene, is the one of the most popular scenes that people talk about all the time in my books. Another is with the first book is she starts talking about, she's trying to keep her aunt from talking about something sexual or in front of her fake husband, and who's a rock star, and she is making biscuits, and she starts talking. The longer she talks, the more phallic it becomes, and it's just, and she's like the good girl, the Sunday school teacher, and she cannot stop. Like, she cannot stop. And and I wrote that scene probably 10 times, getting it like what I heard in my head on paper, because because she's talking to herself the whole time, like, why can't you shut up? And people talk about the biscuit scene all the time, and but it's because it's a little embarrassing, it's a little surprising. You don't expect her to do that, and so yeah, that would be my thing. Flip things around, try to go for the surprise. Don't go for low-hanging fruit all the time. Think about situations that you've been in or you've seen, like in movies or whatever. What made you laugh about that? And then try to incorporate that into your story.
Yeah, I love it. And I think that is so true. And even if you can always go back and like edit in a setup, like, so I'm sure you had to set it up that they thought she was going to have to strip, and then it turns out that it's him.
Oh yeah, it was a whole thing. Like she has this whole morals. I mean, not that she's morally opposed. She's feministically opposed to doing this, but she will do it so they don't have to sleep on the street. And amazing.
Yeah. That sometimes it is sorry, I was just going to say, sometimes it's the setup that really like helps to make the punchline, so to speak, land.
And that is the thing about comedy too. It's almost like a mini story within a story, or multiple mini stories, because there is the setup, it has a beginning, middle, and end, and the payoff. The better you set it up, the better the payoff. And I mean, you have to make the payoff fit the setup, and you can make that like throughout the whole story. There could be something that runs through the whole story. So
okay, so and I'm hoping you're gonna sort of have some answers on this, because you've alluded to the fact that you do this kind of anyway, but you mentioned Theodora Taylor and her excellent book, which everybody calls universal fantasy, but it's not. It's actually seven-figure fiction, isn't it?
Seven-figure author.
She should have named it universal fantasy. But tropes, happily ever afters and happy for nows are critical in romance, but lots of people, I spent a long time, I haven't gone through them all yet, but I watched a lot of the 20 books to 50K. I've read the universal fantasies, and everybody talks about putting a spin on tropes. And I think in romance, there are a lot of tropes in romance that people love, but how do you keep them new and fresh? How do you do these twists on common tropes? I'd love to talk about that.
Well, I hope I do a twist on common tropes. Oh gosh, I kicked my desk. I usually layer tropes. That's usually how I try to get beyond just the one trope, and then it kind of being a little bit cliche. And again, because of the humor, there's usually a surprise, there's usually a twist to it. My latest book, it's a enemies to lovers kind of story, and he thinks he's gotten rid of her. Like, she's a client, and he thinks he's gotten rid of her, and he's driving away. He's so mad, and the next thing you know, she's stowed away in the back of his car and pops up, and now he's stuck with her because he is a good guy. So it's enemies to lovers, but he really is a good guy, and he knows he's been like not nice to her, and he doesn't know why. Well, it's because he really likes her, and he doesn't want to like her because she's reckless and everything. And so a lot of the ways that you can make a twist on a trope is by layering your tropes, or just by the characteristics. Like, that's the whole thing about character development. Like, you have the cocky lawyer, but he really has this super soft heart and this really embarrassment about the way he grew up. And so that makes him interesting. And so really to me, it's the characters that make tropes interesting and not the tropes themselves. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense.
It does. I was listening and trying to like process and intellect on what you're saying. And like, it almost comes back, like, we were talking about like surprises and twists in humor and stuff, but it kind of feels like even with tropes and even with characters, everything is juxtaposed. So you've got the cocky lawyer, but actually, kind of hurt and ashamed on the inside, which is almost like this opposing, like, shame and cockiness. And so like layering the tropes does make sense, especially if you can put some kind of I spoke to this lady recently about I'm going to get it wrong, finding your genius on that, like your whatever it is on the inside that's genius. And she was talking about Carl Jung and how he talks about the shadow, like the dark self, the shadow self. And she was saying that the things that you fear most, like the things that you fear people will see you as. And so like one of the things that I'm afraid of is that people will see me as boring, or they'll see me as a failure. So the opposite of that is that I rebel against everything and do like crazy, wacky things. And I strive for success always, number one competition. And so but those two things, that failure and boring, are like the polar opposite. They are the juxtaposition to who I actually am. And so that makes so much sense. Like, I'm just kind of piecing it together, even like with normal like human psychology and stuff. It makes so much sense. So that really helps. Thank you.
Well, good. One of my critique partners, one of the main people that taught me how to write, said, think of the one thing that your character would never do. And if you're writing a romance, you get two people. So the one thing they would never do, and then do that to them over and over and over again. And so in that book, the second book in the Bride series, he has to take her to this shack of a house he used to live in. He finds out this thing about his family, and then they go on this crazy road trip. And so it's like, all of the things that he's kept so controlled and confined to preserve this image just keep crumbling away. Like, every time he thinks he's got his footing under him, it falls out from under him again because something else happens. And so, and that is what the heroine is seeing. And that's how you get from enemies to lovers. Because if you just stayed enemies to lovers the whole time, you wouldn't have a book. You've got to bring them together. And so that's how she falls in love with him. So
is seeing all of the things that he's afraid to show. I love it. Okay. In romance, there is a term called a grand gesture. Could you explain what it is and how writers can get it just right? So I know that there's a lot of talk around not doing too much, not doing too little, not making it a cliche. So like, how do you actually land a grand gesture? Well, what is it and how do you land it?
The grand gesture is what happens after the hero or heroine realizes they have really screwed up. So it's after the dark night of the soul, where they think, I've lost it all. And then they get this glimmer of hope and know I can get it. I hope I can get it back, but I have to prove to them, him, that I am worthy, or that I see them. And I think that's it more than anything, that I see them, because in my books in particular, because that's really all I can speak to, is that the moment is usually when they retreat back into their selves. They're not being honest. They've retreated back into this wall that they've hid behind, and they are not seeing the other person like they were. They had almost gotten to this point, and that's the whole point about love, that you meet this person and you come together because you see each other, and you still love them, even though you see the things about them. So anyway, so that's what the grand gesture is. And it's different for every book. If you write dark romance, it's going to be different than if you write romantic comedy. I mean, it's just different, but you know it when you see it. And sometimes it's just super obvious. Like in Homecoming King, he puts up a billboard for her. I mean, it's part of the story, and you would see it. So there's this giant billboard. That's a giant grand gesture. However, when I wrote it and sent it to my editor, she was like, he was pretty crappy to her. She forgives him really fast in this. You need to make it harder for him. So I did, and it was a really good lesson because I think that's where people fail sometimes. Like they've had this big blow up where they can never be together because they've said horrible things or done horrible things. And then somebody does a grand gesture and the other person falls at their feet and goes, okay, I forgive you and I love you and let's get married. But in real life, that's not how things work. I mean, you have to let that person know you've wronged them and that you've wronged them. And this is how I've wronged you. And I'm so sorry. Please forgive me kind of thing. And I use that a lot in my books, the whole please forgive me, because I think that's important. I think it's important in relationships. I learned that a long, long time ago, that just saying I'm sorry doesn't really do it in a relationship. You really do need, if you've done something really, really rotten, you really need to ask for forgiveness because that mends that relationship. That's just me and my theology, my kind of life theology kind of thing. But I really believe in that.
So does the apologizing character, is it kind of like the hero's sacrifice in that they have to almost do something that they wouldn't normally do in order to show that forgiveness is okay.
Yeah.
I was trying to think. I was thinking like in Notting Hill, like
my favorite movie.
Oh, is it? Yeah, I love Notting Hill. I was trying to think, and I was sort of going blank because it's the other way around, isn't it? She does the grand gesture, doesn't she?
She does, and then he rejects it. So she brings him the painting, ask him to. I'm just a girl standing in front of a boy, asking him to love her, and he rejects her. The grand gesture is him racing across town to the,
that's it.
They go to the Savoy first. Yeah. I don't know if they're at the Savoy. I can't remember. Anyway, and then getting in there and standing in that mass of journalists and putting himself out there, because that's what, even though that's a great movie because of the twist, because she's sort of the one that has hurt him throughout the movie, but he's the one that really destroys her. Because she really lays it out there. The whole time he's protected himself. And that's even what he does when she brings him the painting and ask him to love her. He's still protecting himself. So when he goes and stands in that room of journalists and then stands out and asks these questions, he has dropped his, the facade and is really putting himself out there for her. That is a grand gesture.
Yeah, that is a grand gesture. And I think that's why I couldn't quite remember it's been at least a year since it was on at Christmas, hasn't it? So I'm due a rewatch.
Exactly.
I was like, there is some kind of sacrifice that the person has to make. So I love that we use that example.
Or like when but like in The Proposal,
is that Sandra Bullock?
And she tries to get she wants her assistant to marry her so that she can stay in the country or whatever. And her grand gesture comes at the black moment where she kind of gives up everything and, comes clean and everything. But then his grand gesture is he comes back for her. Like he comes for her in the middle of the office and everything in front of everybody, where he's talked about her in a bad way. And now he's proclaiming his love for her,
Yeah. Is that normal for there to be two grand gestures, one from each character?
Not necessarily. No, not necessarily. Really, it's the one that screws up the most. Yeah. And it's usually like, in my books, both characters need to grow. Like both of them have a journey, but one has a bigger journey than the other. And one comes to the realization, they kind of come to this healthy place faster than the other. And so in the first book, Running from a Rock Star, she's the one, she's the small town Sunday school teacher worried about what everybody thinks. She's done this crazy thing by marrying this rock star in Vegas. Then he follows her back to Texas because she left her underwear with her name written in it. Anyway, because in Texas, that's what we do. Anyway, so the whole movie, she's still trying to protect her reputation. And so she's the one that has to make the grand gesture. However, he's the one that shows up, but it kind of works out perfectly because she's already made the decision and he hears her make the decision to go back and find him, kind of thing. And so, yeah, I would say there's usually one person that comes to mental health or health in the relationship faster than the other, usually. Okay. In my books, anyway.
So I want to move on now to publishing and success and business and kind of your business model. So I did do a little sniffing around and am I right in thinking that your business model is KU, but not what is, I guess, typically classed as rapid release?
You could say that.
Okay, so I had a look and it looks like you publish sort of 2 books a year. Is that about? No. One book a year.
One.
Okay, so Amazon is lying on those dates.
Well, yeah. Now the first 2 were 6 months apart. And then the next one was almost a year. It was like 10 months or so. And then the next one was a year, and then the next one was a year.
Okay, so that kind of bucks the common advice and sort of, this is what success is. So what do you think were the most important factors in your success?
I think that one is by far the newsletter that I had built before the first book came out, because when that book came out, there were 1,200 people waiting for that book because I had used a preview of the book to build the newsletter. And it was just kind of a fluke thing. It was also one of the benefits really of spending a year in the community, building relationships and learning. And I was working for another author, a romance author. And I mean, I was in a promo, I got like 80 names, but then the romance author I was working for, she was like, why don't you put your preview in this promo I'm doing? And I was like, are you sure? And she was like, yeah. And so I did. And that's where I got the other 1,100 people. And those people wanted that book. And I started my newsletter like the day I got those names, 6 weeks before the book came out. And I just started sending them funny stories and, to let them know that's what they were going to get from me. And then the second thing is that I send a newsletter. This month has not been very typical, but at least twice a month, even between releases, I send a newsletter every 2 weeks, or twice a month, and just checking in, telling funny stories, doing something, giving value if I know people that have free books or KU books that are coming out or something like that.
Okay. And how long was that preview? Was it like a big chunk?
It was 3 chapters. It was all. I know.
Wow. Okay.
But it ended on a big hook. And so I was really lucky that's just how it turned out. I also run ads, I mean, that's another way that I keep things going. But yeah, it would be a lot easier in a lot of ways if I wrote faster. It's just not my process yet. I'm not saying it never will be, but it's just not my process yet to write faster. So.
And do you predominantly do Facebook ads? Do you do BookBub ads? Do you
Facebook? Yeah, Facebook.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. I find it so interesting that there is no one path to success.
No,
and it really pisses
there's
me
not.
off when everybody's like, you must rapid release, you have to write fast, you have to write in this genre, and you have to do these ads, because it's just bollocks. Like, there are, for every person who rapid releases into KU and spends £2,000 a day on Facebook ads, there are, you know, half a dozen other people who've done it a completely different way and don't do that. And so, yeah, I think it's really important to share those authors like on the show, so that listeners don't think that if they can't write, you know, a book a month, that they're never going to have success, because you absolutely will be. And I think the other thing that you said that's really important is what you do with the newsletter, and the fact that you are cultivating relationships there and giving value just by telling funny stories. And are they funny stories from your life? Are they from the characters? Are they
usually from my life? It was hard during 2020 because I couldn't get out and embarrass myself in public, so I had to come up with some other things. But yeah, I mean, in fact, I just told a story on TikTok that, you know, it's like, how do these things happen to me? I don't even know. I don't try, you know, they just weird, funny, awkward things happen to me. But I feel like, yeah, that, and then I have a Facebook group that I keep people. Plus, my readers know they're not getting a book. I mean, they want it. They're really sweet about it, but they know. And I've just been really lucky that when I put a book out, you know, they come back and they buy it. I mean, and they tell their friends. And so each release has been better than the last. So, you know.
And so let's talk a little bit about that intervening time. You've mentioned that you like email your audience to kind of maintain that relationship. Do you still grow your mailing list? How do you do that? Like, what kind of stuff do you do to keep your Facebook group engaged? Like, how do you sustain that over the course of 10 months or a year between releases?
Yeah. I do grow my email list. I have a freebie on my website. There's freebies and, you know, there are signups in the back of my book. I give away, after the first Bride's book, I give away a extra scene to get people to sign up. And it says, if you want to know what happens to Scarlett and Gavin a year later, it involves a hot rock star, a naked trip to the barn, and the Baptist preacher. Click here. So who's not going to click there? And so they sign up. And so those kind of in the background, my list is growing all the time. And then I do an automation system for each list that I have, you know, because I just have mine broken out because I got to see where everything's coming from. And so they get the automated, so they can get off if they want. If they just wanted the freebie, they have time to get off before they're, you know, on my list too long. And so that I do that. I do run some promos, you know, during the year with my freebie, or I'll do a free run of my backlist, you know, I'll space those out. And with every you know, every book that's sold or every book that's read, there's the potential to get a new person on my list. And then what was the other question? I'm sorry.
So I think I was asking sort of what you do in the 10 months between.
And so, yeah. And then in my Facebook group, I'm just in there. And then I've recently gotten someone to help me in there. So she posts something every day. I go in and comment and stuff, but I'm not posting every day. But if I do post something, I always comment, you know, to the people that comment back. And, you know, I've on holidays, I've done a free thing for just my group or just my list, you know, my email list and stuff like that to try to, you know, just keep them engaged. It's hard. It's hard. It would be a lot easier if I wrote faster. I will tell you, because it's just hard.
It is hard. I have too many things. I think I have like Patreon, and I have a Facebook group, and I have Instagram, and I always find that when I try to sort of engage with one, I end up slipping, and like I have to then go back and try and engage with the other one, just because
it is very hard.
It is hard. It is hard to try and juggle that. And I don't think anybody really has the right answer unless you've got, you know, you can afford loads of assistance to but then I don't really like the thought, I have a virtual assistant who helps schedule things, but I still do the commenting. So if someone's commenting with my name, it's me that's commenting, unless I've been hacked,
me too.
But, you know,
I mean, she just posts, like mine will post just something every day to get to keep engagement going.
Yeah.
We started it before the last book came out to help, you know, just people are more likely to read a book if it's recommended to them by somebody else than they are to see an ad. And we wanted to build that up, like really kind of rally the troops, get them like excited and involved. And so we started before she contacted me. She's one of my listeners. She was like, it makes me sad that I don't see your name like mentioned with other people's names, because your books are funny like theirs. They're just like theirs. And I found out about those people through you. And so she said, we need to get your name out there better. And it has helped. It has helped. And it did help a lot during the release. But it's just hard right now. 2020 was okay. 2021 has kicked my behind. It's just been hard. You know, I mean, I'm still making a living. I'm still making what I need to make. But it is not easy. I'm pulling out all the stops and doing all the things. And so, you know, it's gotten harder. The market's just a lot more flooded. I think because of TikTok, YA and dark romance have become really, really popular. Reverse harem, dark romance. And rom-coms are not slipping. They're just not getting the visibility that they were getting at times. I mean, I'm not blaming anything. I'm just saying, you know, the market shifts, and that's just how things happen, you know.
Yeah.
It'll
I think
swing
the
back.
YA one is a funny one because there's traditional, I don't mean traditional as in traditionally published, although a lot of YA is still dominated by trad publishing, but sort of traditional YA for teens. And then there's like YA that the adults are reading that are sometimes slightly not really quite YA.
Right,
and
exactly.
And so there's kind of this mishmash of what YA is now.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely one of these 30-year-olds reading YA.
Yeah.
You know?
Me too.
I just love
Not
love.
30. I wish. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, I had the pleasure of being on your show a little while ago, and I will leave a link to that episode in the show notes.
Thank you.
And your podcast is called Wish I'd Known Then. So I couldn't not ask you the same question. So what do you wish you'd known before you started writing, you know, kind of / publishing?
How bad my comparisonitis would be. I did not know that I would do that. I really have never really been a person that compared themselves to other people. Like, I had a friend, we used to live in Austin, another city in Texas, and we had this one couple friend, and she's like, they're just perfect. I'm like, they're not. I mean, I don't know what they have going on, but they have something going on, because everybody has something going on. You just have to know that. And I've always known that. I don't know how, I've just always known that. But when I started publishing, I did not realize how bad the comparisonitis would hit me and how it would affect me. And I think if I had been more mentally prepared for that, I might have weathered a few emotional storms better. It really has derailed me at times, because, you know, just looking at other people, because there's a saying that says, you know, it's not fair to compare your insides to other people's outsides. And that's what you're doing when you're comparing yourself to other authors. You don't know what's going on. You don't know what they have going on in their lives. On both sides, like if they're not doing well, or they were and they aren't now, or, you know, you just don't know. And it really hit me hard in 2020, really hard. And I didn't expect it. It was the weirdest thing. So anyway, that's what I wish I'd known.
Do you have competition in your strengths?
I do. It's in the top 10.
It's in the top
Interesting.
10.
Because so yeah, the reason I'm asking is because not comparisonitis necessarily, but comparison is meant to be generative for people with high competition. So it's interesting to hear that it still has that darker side, because I know that for the most part, and it's not always, for the most part, I will see someone succeed and I'll be like, that's wicked. Now I'm going to go and do that, and use it as a generative thing. And then every so often there will be something that will just like come in from left of field and just bam, take out my legs, and I'm like,
Yeah, exactly.
Like the end of the world. What's the point? I might as well just quit. Like. Really.
And it's usually people that are publishing really fast, and I mean, I'm not going to do like. My life is not really set up to do that. I mean, you would think I'm an empty nester, but it's not, because I have, that's one of the things I've learned over the past year and a half, 2 years almost, what's important. And that has helped the comparisonitis, but that also, it triggers it sometimes too. So yeah, I don't know. It just really has. Also, I'm an extrovert, and so the last 2 years have been really hard, or year and a half has been really hard for me. I have lost a lot of energy. I've lost a lot of just that connection with people that gives me a ton of energy. I haven't had it, and so that has undermined a lot of, and I think that's what's made it worse. But it's still there. I mean, I am always happy for people. I mean, even people I don't necessarily like, I'm like, yes. I mean, if you can do it, then that means other people can do it. And that it's possible. I mean, if you want to work that hard, it's possible. But yeah.
One of the things that I do is I choose the field that I'm stepping onto, and I refuse to step onto the rapid release field. Like, that's not what I want to win. I have got no interest in winning that game, because like you, that's not going to make me happy. Like, that's going to make me exhausted, and I want to spend time with my son whilst I still have a shred of energy. Like, I don't have many shreds of energy, but I have some now. I
get it. Yeah. I went from 1 grandchild to 6 in a year. Like, I have 6. I know. Exponential growth.
Wow.
So I have other things that are really way more important than writing. I mean, I love writing and I love publishing and I love my readers, but if it comes down to a battle, my family's going to win every time.
Yeah, you need to win on the Nan field right now.
Yes.
Yeah, number one Nan.
Coco.
Right here.
Yeah, Coco. That's what they call me. Coco.
Oh, I love that. My mum. So, random story. My great grandmother was called Bye Bye, because every time my dad would walk in the room, she'd go bye bye. My grandmother is Jewish, so she's called Bubby. My mum is called Barbara, so she is called Baba. And so I like the generational, like down there. So I have decided that if my son has kids, I'm going to be called Bam Bam, because how could I not continue the tradition?
How could you not? Yes,
how could I not? So yeah,
exactly.
I love that. Coco, that's so lovely. I can't believe we have come to the end of our conversation, but thank you so much for your time today. And before you go, this is the Rebel Author Podcast.
Yes.
So can you tell everyone about a time you unleashed your inner rebel?
I have 2 things. One is writer related. One is not. When I was in the 8th grade, I'm a rule follower. Like, I've always been a rule follower, but I was in the 8th grade, and me and a couple of other people got it in our brains that we needed to have a sit-in. So after lunch, I'm number 4 woo. 4? Yeah. So I convinced my 8th grade class of 100 people, we need to go sit on the football field. When the bell rings, we go sit on the football field. We don't go in. No. And they all went. No. I'm like, what are you people doing? Follow me. I don't know. So we all go and sit on the football field, and the scariest teacher there comes out there, and she looks at us and she goes, babies, you better get in that school. And I mean, it was like, we just scattered, and we ran, and we all got in trouble. And in Texas back then, you got licks. Like we got licks with a paddle. Yeah, all 100 of us got licks with a paddle.
No.
Yes.
Oh my goodness me.
So that was my one real rebel moment, is just as a child. And then the second is, I think my second is really something that part of what I've learned over this last year is that I don't have to make all the money. I just have to make the money I need and what my family needs. And I can do that without making myself crazy, without chasing the rabbit, and, putting out stories that my readers really love, and writing for my readers and the readers like them, as opposed to someone else's readers who may not like my stories. So that's, I think, the biggest rebel mindset shift I've had, is that I don't have to do that.
I love that so much. And that's sort of where I am going next year. Like, I will run my nonfiction business because that brings in my money. And I'm going to write the young adult lesbian romance stories because I fucking want to. And I need, there's so few books out there for teenage lesbians. And I didn't have them when I was young. And I wanted, I was such a book worm, and I think I don't know, I just need to write those stories for those kids who need those stories, and I don't care what happens. So absolutely. Amazing. Thank you so much. Would you like to tell everyone where they can find out more about you, your books, your podcast, anything else that you would like to add?
Sure. You can find me on Amazon or jamialbright.com. I'm on all the social media except Twitter. I mean, I'm on Twitter. I mean, I have a Twitter, but I'm not on Twitter. Lately, I've been a lot on TikTok, a lot, Instagram and Facebook. And you can find the podcast at Wish I'd Known Then for Writers podcast. And we just had our 100th episode, so it's been very fun. We love our podcast. We love doing it. And then, I think that's where people can find me. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I will, of course, leave all of those links in the show notes.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And
you're welcome. This has been super fun.
Oh, good. And of course, a massive thank you to all of the show's listeners and the show's patrons. If you would like to get early access to all of the episodes, then you can do so by visiting patreon.com/Sasha Black. I'm Sasha Black. You were listening to Jami Albright, and this was the Rebel Author Podcast. Next week, I'm talking to Paddy Finn, and we're talking all about Kickstarter for indie authors, how you can use it, what it is, why you maybe should use it, and how to run a campaign. So join me next week for that. Don't forget to tune in and subscribe on your podcatcher. And when you have a moment, please leave a review.